For centuries, an uncomfortable truth has been buried beneath translations, politics, and carefully crafted religious narratives. But today, that truth finally rises to surface. Who were the Hebrews of the Bible, really? How did they truly look? And why was their appearance, culture, and identity rewritten over time? What you are about to hear is not taught in schools, not shown in churches, and never highlighted in mainstream documentaries. This is a hidden story, the origin of a people whose true identity was pushed into the shadows. Forget the modern illustrations. Forget the sanitized images from European art. The Hebrew people of the Bible were not described as light-skinned at all. In fact, the biblical texts consistently point to a people with dark, deeply pigmented skin, resembling the Afro-Asiatic populations of ancient Africa and the Middle East. Lamentations 4 verse 8 describes the Hebrews as having skin darker than coal. Job 30 verse 30 says, "My skin is black." And in the New Testament, Paul is mistaken for an Egyptian, something that would only make sense if he looked like one. If Paul resembled an African, if Moses grew up as an Egyptian prince without ever standing out, and if Joseph blended so perfectly with Egyptians that his own brothers could not recognize him, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. The ancient Hebrews were a people with dark skin, strong features, and Afro-Levantine appearance. They were not European. They did not resemble modern Western portrayals in the slightest. Their identity is tied to Africa, linguistically, culturally, and physically. The Hebrew story began at the crossroads between Africa and the Middle East, a region where cultures, languages, and skin tones overlapped long before Europe became part of the conversation. Abraham, the patriarch of Israel, came from ancient Mesopotamia, and ancient Mesopotamia was not a land of pale-skinned people. It was a diverse region filled with Afro-Asiatic populations, including Cushites, Nubians, and dark Semitic tribes. The early Hebrews lived among and intermarried with Canaanites, Midianites, Egyptians, Cushites, and East African peoples. One of the most overlooked examples is Moses himself. He married a Cushite woman, a black woman from ancient Nubia, located in modern-day Sudan. And when others question that marriage, the Bible records God defending it. Their lineage was interwoven with African bloodlines from the beginning, but the culture of the Hebrews is just as revealing as their appearance. Their clothing was made of coarse linen garments, protective head coverings, sandals hardened by desert rock, and jewelry that carried symbolic meaning. Their hair was tightly curled or thick and coarse, and they were described as using oils to protect their skin in the brutal desert climate. Their traditions reflected Afro-Asiatic culture, rhythmic drumming, ceremonial dancing, oral storytelling, tribal gatherings, nomadic herding, and communal living. They were a people far more connected to the traditions of Africa and the Semitic world than to anything that resembles medieval Europe. And they were not an empire of marble and luxury. They were wanderers, shepherds, farmers, laborers, a people shaped by struggle and survival. The biblical world was heat, dust, stone, tents, villages carved from clay, and kingdoms built beside the Nile and Red Sea. The Hebrews were molded in hardship. The ancient customs of these early communities continue to echo across generations. Even as empires rose and fell, their identity survived through songs, rituals, and oral traditions carried from parent to child. Around firelight gatherings, elders retold stories of origins, migrations, and covenants, their words preserving a memory older than any scroll or monument. And in these stories, the image of the early Hebrews remained consistent. A people shaped by the sun-scorched landscapes of Africa, marked by resilience, endurance, and faith. Across different regions, scattered groups began preserving fragments of what they believed to be their ancestral heritage. Some practiced rituals similar to ancient Hebrew purification laws. Others kept dietary customs with striking resemblance to biblical commandments. Certain families maintained oral histories describing ancestors exiled from a land of shepherds, prophets, and kings. While scholars continue debating the historical accuracy of these claims, the cultural similarities are undeniable: rhythms, proverbs, and naming traditions that mirror ancient Near Eastern patterns. What is most astonishing is how these memories endured even through centuries of oppression. During colonization, forced conversions, and slavery, many people had fragments of identity in songs, ceremonies, and encoded stories. Spirituals echoing Hebrew laments, tales of crossing waters into freedom, rituals of mourning and covenant that carried ancient motifs. These cultural survival mechanisms preserve pieces of a past the world tried to erase. As modern research evolves, new connections continue surfacing. In certain African communities, scholars find rituals involving lunar calendars, sacred assemblies, purification baths, and covenant practices that closely resemble those of early Israelites. While these parallels cannot serve as definitive proof, they raise compelling questions about the endurance of cultural memory across continents. Oral histories also reveal intriguing details. Stories of ancestors migrating from lands to the northeast, crossing deserts and rivers, narratives that align with known migration routes from the ancient Near East into Africa. Linguists have discovered words and linguistic structures in some regional dialects that resemble ancient Semitic roots. Elders speak of ancestral traditions emphasizing a single creator, divine covenants, and prophetic visions, themes deeply rooted in early Hebrew spirituality. Perhaps the strongest connection lies in identity. Despite centuries of displacement and forced assimilation, many groups continued identifying themselves as chosen, preserved, set apart, protected by a covenant they cannot fully articulate but deeply felt. These self-identifications survived colonial suppression, enslavement, and cultural erasure. Identity, even when attacked, finds ways to adapt, hide, and endure. Today, individuals and entire communities across Africa, the Americas, and the Middle East still feel drawn to the ancient story of Israel, not through modern politics, but through ancestral memory. They see reflections of this heritage in their ceremonies, family lineages, and long-held traditions. These connections were preserved without DNA tests or historical textbooks, carried instead through music, storytelling, and ritual. As researchers study these patterns with increasing depth, the narrative of the Hebrews becomes richer and more intricate. It moves beyond a single geographical location or ethnic category and expands into a story shaped by migration, diaspora, cultural blending, and centuries of resilience. The early Hebrews were not a static people. They were travelers, survivors, and preservers of identity across harsh landscapes and historical upheavals. When all these threads, cultural, oral, linguistic, historical, and spiritual, are woven together, they form a mosaic of a people whose roots reach deep into Africa's soil, a people shaped by desert heat, tribal memory, sacred covenant, and generations of struggle. Though scattered across nations and continents, echoes of their origins remain alive in rituals, phrases, melodies, and ways of seeing the world. This story is not simple, nor universally agreed upon, but it is powerful, a testament to how identity endures even when history tries to silence it. And today, that ancient echo invites the world to reconsider what has been forgotten and to look again at the origins of a people whose influence continues to shape culture, spirituality, and memory across the globe.